What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Homie Hangout, where we help others move in excellence. First off, I apologize. I had a goal to do a video every single day in the month of October, and I dropped the ball, right? But here I am, and I'm actually gonna do two today. So I'm gonna cover this topic, and then probably like 1 o'clock, I'm gonna upload a video on Prop 36, a ballot initiative in California during this election cycle. I'll put some stuff about Prop 6 on there also, and just give you guys the truth, and then you go ahead and vote based on your values and your principles. So stay tuned for that because there's a lot of bad information out there. Shout out Mudville Media. They had put something out on their channel briefly, so I'm gonna kind of cover that same stuff but expand a little bit more. And then before I get questions, right, because it always happens, yes, I'm talking about my experiences doing time around the brothers as a Norteno in the California Department of Corrections. Okay. No, I am not a gang member now. People always, are you active or whatever? Listen, I was a street gang member in the Bay Area for many, many years. I went to prison, and yes, I was a northerner, then a norteño slash hermano slash insole, whatever language you guys want to use, through the duration of my time, right? Until I paroled from 96 till December 9, 2005. And then I returned to my origin of citizenship. That might make sense to some of you guys. That might not, probably to a lot of you, and that's okay. It's probably not supposed to. But I came home a non-affiliate from the moment I stepped out the gate, and I've remained that way for almost 20 years, and I'm happy about it. But what I'm talking about is a time in which obviously I very much was affiliated, and that's the lens through which I'm talking about my interactions with Black folks in prison, right? So, and again, it's era specific. It's 1996 to 2005. It's level 3 yard, level 4 yard, Ad Seg shoe. Things have changed now. On some yards, the Northerners and Blacks, that relationship has been strained by the increase in the relationship between Northerners and Southerners, right? And so that adds a whole different dynamic that was all after after I'd already come home. So I can't really speak to that. I have opinions and thoughts on that stuff, but it really doesn't matter because I'm not affiliated and I'm not in prison. So my experiences, I want to maybe dispel a few things, right? Or at least give my perspective on some stuff that I hear that I think sometimes maybe isn't put in the right context. So I'm not here to critique anybody else's video or challenge what other folks have said. I know that this has been a topic, and raza and blacks in prison has been a topic lately. Everybody has their own experiences. I'm just talking about mine, right? And speaking for mine. And so first off is this idea that Northerners and blacks, Northerners in Northern California, obviously, that there's this cozy relationship with blacks for all of them, always. And that's not necessarily true. You have a lot of places in Northern California that produce a lot of Northerners where you just don't have a lot of black people. So there's not a lot of actual experience in the streets. There's a lot of Northerners that have never had a conversation with a brother until they came to prison. And even then, aren't always so excited to have those conversations because they're not familiar with them, right? They didn't grow up around them. They don't really know them. And, a lot of times, stereotypes and prejudices and that kind of stuff are built out of a lack of familiarity. So this idea that all Northerners grew up around, around black folks just isn't true. A lot did. Those from the urban areas, for the most part did. Oakland, San Francisco, a lot of places in the Bay Area, Sacramento, but not all. So you have Northerners with kind of different ideas coming into prison and sharing facilities with the blacks. For me, I came up in the Bay Area. I came up in urban environments and black projects and everything else. So obviously there was a level of comfort and familiarity there. Doesn't mean I got along with all the brothers that I saw, but it was not unfamiliar to me. And that's true for a lot of Northerners, but not all, right? If you're coming from Tulare County, right? If you're coming from, I don't know, other just places in the valley, right? Places along 99. If you're coming along places from along 99, then maybe you didn't. But again, if you've been to YA or you've been to prison before or whatever, then a lot of folks build that comfort level because we're on the same side of the yard. People throw the word allies around a lot, and I think it's a strong word. It's a word that I heard used and that I probably used at the time. But I think it depends again on what's been your experiences in the streets with black people and what's been your experiences in prison or other carceral settings with black people as to whether you really go that far to use the word allies or not. But either way it goes, we don't jump for each other unconditionally. That's just not how it works. And I'm gonna give you guys a couple examples of interactions or experiences. I'm not gonna tell whole big old long stories. I'm not gonna make this big old video, but just a couple of things to sort of highlight a few different situations, right? And maybe I'll expand on those later in future videos. But in Solano, buildings 4, 5, and 6 was the northern or black side of the yard. Buildings 1, 2, 3 was the south siders and white side of the yard. Every now and then you would get some woods. Rarely happened with the south siders, but every now and then you would get some woods that would come hang out on our side of the yard. Our meaning the northern black side of the yard. And just kind of post up there, right? Not large groups, not multiple groups, but just a couple guys standing there. Sometimes they were doing business, they were waiting to buy some drugs or something else or sell some drugs. Sometimes they were waiting for their homeboy to come out of the building, and they happen to live on that side of the yard. Sometimes they were just standing there, like kind of daydreaming, whatever. I don't know. And the brothers never approached them about that, right? That was always on the Northerners to get at them and remind them politely, respectfully, if you don't have business over here, you would be more comfortable on the other side of the yard with your people, right? And just like, we didn't let our people go over there and hang out either. It's not like it was a one-way street. And I've approached the brothers, and I've been there for those conversations of approaching some of the blacks about like, hey, how come we're always the ones that are getting at these dudes? Like, this is our side of the yard. Why is it always us that's getting at them? And some of the groups, in particular the guys from the Bay Area, would be like, okay, no, that's a good point. And we'll try to be more mindful of that. But in general, the feeling, the response that I got, that I saw was, we ain't tripping because they're not posing a threat, right? It's and not that they're incapable of posing a threat, but just one or two random guys, white guys or Southsiders, right? Because every now and then Southsiders would do it, but for the most part, their people would get at them, and so they're a little bit more disciplined. But is one or two Woods or one or two Southsiders standing over here doesn't pose a threat to us, right? Like, it's our side of the yard, our numbers are really deep, so we ain't really tripping, and us, that wasn't the issue, right? Our issue was pushing a line, it's not allowed type thing, so it was a different philosophy. They just didn't really care. It wasn't a fear thing. It was just, we don't care. Now, if there was 2 over here and 2 over there and 3 over there, then I'm sure then they, some of the brothers would look around and be like, hey, wait a minute. This is looking like there's a threat being posed, and then they would react. There was one time in which a couple of the Woods were got at, told go hang out on the other side of the yard. It turned into this whole big issue that it really didn't have to be and didn't make any fucking sense. But nonetheless, it did. And it looked for a minute like it was going to kick off, right? Southsiders wanted no parts of it, but it looked like it was going to kick off with the Woods. And in that case, yes, groups of the brothers stepped up and was like, look, if they come walking over here, then it's on a crack. And we had kind of a plan of attack worked out with them. And so it wasn't that they were unwilling. I think maybe looking from the outside, it may appear like, oh, they don't care. It wasn't that they didn't care. It's just a different threshold of what mattered to them than what mattered to us, right? We were often taught, hey, if you go somewhere, especially go down south, at the time, there was a handful of yards or prisons down south where they would occasionally send Northerners, but those were dominant south side of yards. Northerners weren't allowed to be on those yards and live comfortably, right? So if you were labeled as a Northerner, if you were just from Northern California, regardless if you were a gang member, if you're just raza from Northern California and you pulled up on one of those yards down south, you were liable to have to keep your shirt on or have to get taxed or get bullied or whatever. And apparently some people would stay in that environment and would just endure that treatment. I don't get it. I would have rather got off. But apparently some people would just pucker up and go for it. I don't know if it's because they weren't really gang members or if they just cowards or what. I don't know. But we were taught, hey, if you go down there and you land on a yard like that, right, get at the blacks. Get at the blacks for some assistance. Assistance meaning like a knife or something. Don't get at the other guys that are quote unquote Northerners because they're not real Northerners. They're up under the thumb of these guys and they're probably going to betray you. So don't trust them. They're out of the car. They're trash as far as we're concerned. But get at the brothers and have them slide you something. And I have heard of situations, I've never been in that experience, but I have heard of situations where the brothers would in fact do that, right? I haven't heard of a situation where they jumped, where they're like, oh, we're going to kick it off and we're going to fight alongside you and we're going to get in a conflict with the Southsiders to defend you, random Northerner dude or a couple of Northerner dudes off the bus. But we'll put something in your hand, you know what I mean, and help you have a fighting chance. Sure, fuck it, why not? And I had somewhat of an experience like that in Salinas Valley, even though it wasn't Southern California, it wasn't a Southern yard, but it was a New Flowers yard, general population, GP, all that shit. But it was a New Flowers yard. And I had talked to a brother from the Bay Area and was like, hey, I couldn't make something because I had a celly and I'm not going to make something in front of my celly. But my celly was a lop, so I'm not trying to get off on them to get off on the yard. I'd rather get off on somebody who was a factor for what at the time I would call the degenerate side, right? And he was like, oh, yeah, no, man, I got you. And then when it came time to slide it underneath the door, he didn't have me. So it varies, right? And that was that individual. He was cool. He's from the city. Like, we would chop it up and shared pictures with each other. Like, we was cool. I don't know if it really was just some miscommunication on his end. I don't know what the issue was, because I still wound up going out there and going to the hole. I just didn't have a weapon. So it varies. And that brings me to another point of I hear, in particular, when I hear conversations about conflicts between Southsiders and blacks, it's a race thing, and I get it, but that's not how it works with Northerners. Not in my experience and not in any place that I saw, and really not even anything that I heard of. When Northerners have an issue with the blacks on the yard, it's not the blacks. It's not all the brothers. It's normally one or two individuals, and therefore we have an issue with their car, with their group. So we had an issue where, I don't even remember off the top of my head who did what. I think either the brother bumped into the homeboy and spilled coffee and it got on his sweats, or vice versa, right? One person was wearing a brand new light gray sweatsuit from a package, and the other person had a cup of coffee at night yard, bumped into him, spilled him, both sides pissed off. There was no risk of it going up between all the Northerners and all the blacks on the yard. There was no way. Not because the other black groups, I think, were scared of Northerners or scared of getting off. It just wasn't their issue. So when we had problems, it wasn't racial. It just wasn't racial. It wasn't looked at that way. It was group segment. It was our group segment, which was all the Northerners, and your group segment, which is the Bay Area car. A lot of times it was a Bay Area car, but it was a Bay Area car, or, Crips from Southern California, or Bloods from Sacramento, or however it was, right? And so I think that's a little bit of a difference too, and again, I think some of that might have changed in recent years because of how the politics on the yard have changed. But in my time, again, I'm not aware of any racial conflict between the Northerners and the blacks anywhere, really. It would only be a group, maybe two groups, right? If one group wanted to jump for their homeboy, or if this dude was selling for somebody from a different faction, then then maybe they would both kind of jump in. But it was not a race issue. It was a group segment issue. Um, it yeah, it was different, right? It was different. I I learned a lot from some brothers on the yard. I had some great conversations. I would get great literature. I was around some Panthers. I was around some old school cats that had the death penalty before the moratorium in the 70s or whatever. And they had all the books, they had all the literature, and so they would pass it to me, and it was all contraband stuff. I was photocopies hidden in illegal work. But we would have conversations, they would shoot it, I would read it. I had cellies sometimes that were like, bro, why the fuck you reading that? Like why you reading George Jackson? Shit that gotta do with us. But I found value in the schooling skill still, right? It was still informative. It actually helped me form my class consciousness mindset, right? Where it's things aren't really about race, they're about economics. Race is a factor and all this other stuff, but if you're aware of kind of those teachings and those writings, then you sort of get where I'm coming from. But so I had great conversations, and then other times there was brothers that I didn't really care for, I didn't really talk to, and I feel like they probably didn't want to talk to me and give a fuck about me either. And they were standoffish, they did their own thing, which was fine. So it really was case by case and person by person and yard by yard. Who had authority on that yard for these different groups, and what homeboys were on the yard, and where were they from? In every prison in California that I saw, uh, there's there's a tendency for everybody, regardless of your race, right? For everybody to be from the same general area, or not everybody, but for the majority to be from a certain area. So, like in Salinas Valley, even though it's in Salinas, Northern California, Norteno headquarters, blah, 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 there was way more people from Southern California in that prison than from Northern California. Way more whites from Southern California, way more blacks from Southern California, way more raza from Southern California, which means way more Southsiders. Uh, that's just what the dynamics were. In Solano, there's a lot of people from Sacramento and a lot of people from the Bay Area. And that's true for all the groups. And in turn, the Northerners had the numbers on the yard. There wasn't that many Southsiders. And that was the only place I seen upstate Southsiders in prison was in Solano. So that bears a factor too, right? I know in Solano, and there's a lot of brothers that never seen Northerners, that had been in prison before, but they'd only been around Southsiders. So they talk about Mexicans, they talk about the Migos, they talk about this. They're talking about Southsiders because that's what they've been around. I remember in Solano, there was a dude who came, a black dude, I guess he came off the bus. And wherever he came from, there wasn't Northerners, I guess. There was only Southsiders. And he had gotten into it with them or for whatever reason had a real chip on his shoulder when it came to them. Well, like I said, Solano was dominantly Northerners, right? That was the main group numbers wise. So we go to Chow, and the Northerners and the blacks sit, next to each other. We tend to sit at the table with ourselves, and they tend to sit at the table with themselves, but it's not unheard of to have Northerners and blacks at the same tables in that row in which the Northerners and the blacks kind of meet, right? And same thing with Southsiders and the whites. You don't see a whole bunch of tables with a couple Northerners and a couple black dudes. You just see a row of that kind of mixing. And so we were at Chow, and I guess dude was sitting there, and either homeboy went to sit at his table or went to walk by him or say excuse me or something. And the brother jumped up hell of aggressive. And it all happened really quick. But he jumped up, got hella mouthy, used derogatory terms for Southsiders towards the homeboy, right? So a couple other homeboys jumped up. The other black dudes jumped up and grabbed their dude and was like, bro, sit the fuck down. Like, what are you doing? And the yard didn't get laid down. There was no fighting, right? The COs didn't react. After Chow, we didn't come out for yard right away. We were slammed down for like an hour or two before they opened up the doors for yard. And when they opened up the doors for yard, that black dude for the Chow Hall got his ass whooped, right? By another black dude. I'm pretty sure it was like a one-on-one too, because I was tripping. Maybe maybe they knew that the guy that was going to beat them up just had hands, because you don't ever want to lose in like disciplining somebody. You don't want to be the one handing down discipline and also get your ass whipped. That would be bad. That's why we generally send 2 people just to make sure, or try to make sure. I'm pretty sure though that was a 1-on-1, but nonetheless, the dude that got out of pocket in the chow hall, got hands put on him, right? And so it was no harm, no foul. They handled it within themselves. It wasn't a big deal. There was no heightened tension. It wasn't like, oh, just in case. And the interesting thing with how they program is, I'm certain that black dude, because they both got snatched up, and the guy that beat him up, if I remember, I came back to the yard. Maybe he came back to the yard a couple days later. The dude who got beat up did not come back to the yard. He might have just gone over to the yard next door, in which case the Northerners wouldn't have done nothing, right? Because he didn't actually harm anybody or anything else. He just got mouthy, and he paid a price for it at the hands of his own people. So we still program alongside him. But I remember his people saying like, hey, that fool ain't never been around no Northerners. He thought you guys were Southsiders. You was getting too close. And he just reacted, bro. But we understand that you can't do that. You can't disrespect people in prison. It's not how it works. No matter who you are and no matter who you're talking to, you can't disrespect people. I've seen Northerners get removed for disrespecting Southsiders. I've seen Southsiders remove their own for disrespecting Northerners. And again, this is way before into hostilities. Just because we don't behave that way. And the brothers was no different. Like, you can't just walk around disrespecting people and expect no consequences. But what's different with them versus Northerners is that dude didn't lose his career, right? He could have gone to the other yard, and I'm sure the brothers would have accepted if he went to some other prison, whatever. Like, his homeboys from his neighborhood that he grew up with, or that knows his family, or whatever the case may be, they're not going to just throw him away as trash. Like, fuck you, you got to go PC up now because of this. It's not that serious for them. It's, oh, you got out of line and we put you back in line. Then move along, right? As long as you want to go with the flow, then yeah, come out to the yard and kick it. It's all good. Obviously, as Northerners, we don't tend to work that way. If Northerners put hands on you or put a weapon in you, 9 times out of 10, your career is over. And so just a difference, right? I actually think there's an advantage to doing it kind of the local way, but very different systems and very different politics. So I get why that doesn't work, right? But that's just, again, those are my experiences with them. I know in Salinas, there was a dude, Casper, from Ludus Park. Ludus Park. Casper and Rock, they were cellies. Casper was my dude, bro. That dude was hilarious. And he tripped out on our program, on the Northern program. And we were very short in numbers. And the Bloods were very short in numbers on that yard also, right? The Crips were deep. There was a handful of Hoover dudes. That's why I first kind of heard about the Hoover thing. They walked around with a bunch of orange. Like 2 twins. Looked identical. Apparently they weren't related, but sure enough fuck looked like twins. Were there. And so anyways, he tripped out because we had a couple homeboys that worked behind the wall, right, in PIA doing whatever they did. And so we have mandatory movement. We have mandatory yard. And where the wall is to go to the PIA in Salinas Valley on A yard, that's on the southern white side of the yard. And so there would always be 2 homeboys over there waiting for when the workers came out to pick the homeboy up and walk, because we don't walk around by ourselves in prison. Just, it's not how it works. And I remember he tripped out on that. And he was like, man, my people ain't never, he had a real high pitched voice. He was like, my people ain't never over here picking them. How do you guys do that? How you guys? So there would be those conversations sometimes of adapting from one another's program a little bit, and that mutual respect. But like I said, then there was others, like the Hoover dudes, never had a conversation with them, ever, on the yard. I really don't think that they liked us, to be honest. I don't know why. I really care. So it just varied. It's not like everybody's buddy, but there are some close relationships and close connections built, and it just kind of depends on the individuals. So that's my experiences. I mean, obviously, I have a lot more like isolated stories, but for me, doing time around the brothers as a norteño, I don't know, it was just a little bit different than what I hear when I listen to people talk about blacks and Mexicans doing time around each other in the California prison system. So I thought I'd throw it out there for you guys, man, and curious your thoughts, curious your guys' experiences, people, other channels, whatever, chime in. I don't care. It is what it is. Help others move in excellence. That's what homies do. Help yourself at the same time because you're worth it. Help your community because they need you. Tap into the homeboy Nate Dogg 916, man. One of my favorite channels on YouTube and certainly my favorite person in real life that has a YouTube channel. What's some other one? Hoodie from the Hood is another dope channel, man. And I actually have some content with him. Was supposed to have content with Nate too, but then he had other things going on. But I actually have some content with Hoodie from the Hood on my channel. If you look under the conversations playlist or whatever. But anyways, yeah. You guys have a good one and stay tuned. I got another video, like I said, on those propositions coming up in a few hours. Take care.